Welcome to Unraveling Midlife. I'm your host, Sarah Spence. Thanks for joining me as I explore my own astrological midlife by speaking with all sorts of inspiring people about their life and work. Astrological midlife refers to Western astrology transits that happen for everyone in their late 30s and early 40s, though exact timing varies because of the fascinating dance of the planets. Each of the main midlife transits have an overall theme, with details varying by generation and by individual. The time is often called the midlife crisis. I like to call it the midlife unraveling, a term I pinched from Brené Brown. If you're new to the show, welcome. Don't forget to check out the show notes for items that we reference. At the end of the episode, I often share a track of my original music. However, today's show has a very special feature with an out-of-the-ordinary original piece following directly on from the interview. I have to admit, although I'd heard this music online before, the live experience was something else, so I'm just hoping that the essence of that is captured here. Gary Cook is a sacred site archaeologist, author, documentary maker, and storyteller extraordinaire. To try and sum up everything he does is quite a challenge, as you'll hear in this interview. His 12 years writing in New Zealand's Rainbow News publication in the late 90s and early 2000s is when I first came across him. But as you'll hear, it's not the only reason he's well known. Gary resides in the Bay of Plenty in New Zealand with his wife Raewyn, who he references often. They are clearly quite the team, and who you may even hear in the background pointing out that we had been talking for quite some time, which was true. We discuss some of his books, Pilgrimages with Contemporary Barry Brailsford, Patu Paidehe, and much more. And for a translation there, the Te Aka Māori Dictionary describes Patu Paidehe as fairy-like beings who were seldom seen. Other places our discussion meandered to include New Zealand's sacred sites, such as Castle Hill, known as the birthplace of the gods, which is 2 hours' drive from Christchurch in the Southern Alps, and Te Miringa Te Kakara, a site of an ancient temple north of Lake Taupo in the North Island. Gary, welcome to Unraveling Midlife.
Unraveling Midlife. Actually, I'm quite intrigued by the title. I've been trying for years to unravel, so is this going to be of some assistance to me?
Well, I guess the interesting thing is that I'm at this midlife astrology phase, and you're at kind of like almost the opposite.
Am I ever? Without even saying how old I am.
Yeah, I find it fascinating that the big astrological midlife transit I'm going through, you've actually finished up with, and the other ones I've gone through, you're coming into because of the play of the planets. The planets are at different points for all of us at different ages.
Right.
At those times of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there we are. That's becoming a little clearer, but I'm sure as we continue chatting today, that there'll be a lot more clarity for me, because this is an area that I'm not really conversant with. Okay, my forte years and years ago was numerology.
Oh, really?
Okay, yes, a long time ago in another life.
Oh, can you tell us something about numerology? Is there anything
numerology? Well, no, not a lot in a way.
How did it shape your life?
Shaped our life at a particular time in our life, and I would have been around about 50, which was a transition year for me, as it turns out. And I had an interest in numerology, and I'd been away overseas, and I'd seen people doing numerology at fairs and things like that, And I thought, oh. Came back home, and we had a friend who was a computer buff, and I said, could you write me a program based on Chaldean numerology, which I've been studying? And so he did. He created this incredible program for me. And in those days, the first program was on an old Amstrad computer, which was a British computer, great big bulky thing. And so we put this together, and I thought, wow. So I went and did a couple of fairs and things. So this is interesting. Then I thought, well, I'll take it to somewhere like Victoria Park Market in Auckland, the big weekend market in those days. This is back in the 80s. And set it up. We ended up staying there for 7 years, every Saturday and Sunday, printing furiously little charts for people. And they were just showing people what their strengths and weaknesses were, not making predictions or anything like that. And it went from there to there. And quite interesting, I gave up my day job and just did that for 2 days a week. Wow. So if you can come to light with something which is innovative and you're a front runner or forerunner, you can do well, as you know. And it's interesting, and Ray and I, our life together, we have done a lot of things, her and I, where we've been forerunners. And so we've got in, we've done something, we've manufactured something or made jewellery, which we used to do, and make candles, which was so unique. No one else has seen anything like it. So we're into all this creative stuff, and we just go from one thing to another. And then the numerology came along at the right time. I was had just taken up a job in Auckland, editing and managing a suburban newspaper on the North Shore. And I suddenly found after a couple of months, I just didn't want to get back into newspapers after being away for so many years. So I just left the job and just carried on doing numerology, which provided us with a good income, gave us a good base in which to build ourselves up financially. So it just shows you what you can do.
Wow. I knew a couple of things about what you did, Gary, but numerology was something that I didn't know, but probably because I came across your work about, 8-10 years later when I was a teenager reading Rainbow News.
Oh, good old Rainbow News, of course. My gosh, yes. That was a magazine which was so timely for our age, your age and my age at that stage. And it was a vehicle which allowed us to connect with so many other people around New Zealand and be informed of what was going on in healing circles and wellness circles, and seeing the introduction of new products and new systems and ways of doing it. It was just magic. Yeah. So it was came at the right time, I think, for so many people, and it was helped a lot of people, I think, transition or just make a decision to go this way instead of that way. But of course, at that time, Ray and I had given away the numerology. That was that had gone. And we were involved in show business in Auckland. We set up a business we ran for 25 years. We did live production theatre for children. And we used to do 3 or 4 productions a year. And we did that for a long, long time. And we did it to raise money for children's charities. And over that period of time, we put thousands and thousands of young children into live theatre seats. And that was our aim, to bring live performance theatre before children, which really, really achieved quite a lot. So we were sort of multifaceted, and we would step out of one thing into another. But of course, being involved in the show business, if you like to put it that way, that gave us a good base to work on. We had a big business we set up in Auckland around this. And then, of course, you suddenly found, well, there's more to life than this. This is wonderful, and we're doing it well. And then, of course, there was a book published in the mid-90s by a man called Barry Brailsford. Mm-hmm. And it was called The Song of Waitaha, The Stories of a Nation. And I saw it reviewed in a Sunday newspaper and managed to get hold of the book, read it through very quickly. You can't read it through all that quickly.
No, I have read it.
And suddenly I thought, wow, this is what I've been waiting for. And so Raywin and I, we met Barry and Kushler, and we became very, very close. He became my publisher for my first 2 books, actually. And away we went. And so we thought it would be incumbent on us to travel to various parts of New Zealand to try and bring out the present-day status of the sites and names of places mentioned in Song of Waitaha. So with a nice little list that we'd made up with the help of Barry, we started to flit all over the North and South Island, finding these places obscure as anything. We've done helicopter trips up into the mountains and the Southern Alps and things like that. And then that gave me information, of course, at that time, to write for Rainbow News, because I shared much of our journeys in Rainbow News.
So for listeners who haven't heard of Song of Waitaha, how do we kind of define that in a few sentences?
It was a defining book in the fact that this beautifully crafted book, beautifully illustrated, written in such an incredible style, came about by a particular man by the name of Barry Brailsford, as a scholar and a well-renowned archaeologist. Archaeologist who was also a professor of archaeology and history in Christchurch. Now, he was invited by some old Māori men, old kaumātua, to come and write their story for them. Them was the Waitaha. He knew of the Waitaha because their name had come up in his work. And so they invited him away for the first weekend. And I think it was 7 or 8 of these elderly men. And they were the storytellers and the story keepers. And the Song of Waitaha, 6 was it, Rowan? Thank you, Rowan. She corrected me nicely. Sometimes my memory plays tricks on me. And between these 6, they retained 200 stories. And Barry had to sit with an individual over a long period of time while that individual sung and recited his story to Barry in ancient Waitaha Māori language through an interpreter, and then Barry was not allowed to record it or write it down on the spot. He had to go outside, and then the interpreter and he would write it all out. And so they actually this way recorded 200 songs out of a large amount of, they actually had 2,000 songs available to them, but Song of Waitaha was based on 200 only. And so those 200 produced this amazing volume which talked all about these people, where they came from, how they came to New Zealand, when they came to New Zealand, where they settled, how many iwi they had all throughout the country. And it just goes into such great depth. So well recommended to anybody to pick up a copy. It's still available through the New Zealand Library Services. You can buy, there was another copy put out a few years ago, so you can still buy new copies of it. But it is, if anyone has a deep interest in the history of New Zealand, and looking at, without being, we've got to be quite sensitive here, but looking at who may have been here before Māori came.
It is quite topical.
It is, but this has been something that Ray and I have pursued for a long, long time. And therefore, we went around the country seeking out evidence of where these places were they mentioned. Evidence was not easy to find on the ground because the ancient people, the Waitaha people, didn't build from stone. They built from wood, which of course wood doesn't last in this climate. And also they had no need to build big fortifications on tops of hills because over the 1,000 years they were here before Polynesian Maori arrived, they transitioned into 200 iwi or tribes right throughout the length and breadth of New Zealand.
Out of curiosity, did they call them iwi then, or did they call them hapu?
No, they didn't even have that term. Right. No. It was something quite different. But the equivalent, they talk about 200 iwi, so that is just a little bit bigger. Doesn't mean to say it's a group which is any larger. And so they set themselves up and did very well. They were the people of peace. They had disputations amongst themselves with other people and other tribes close by. Disputations were settled mano a mano, and this was done by a show of individual strength with two people sort of biffing it out. They had no weapons. The Waitaha had no taiaha. They had no mere. The only weapons they had were actually tools. They were bird catching spears, fish trapping, and of course digging tools for gardening. So they were truly the people of peace, and that's what first attracted Rowan and I. How's it possible? Isn't it wonderful that these people supposedly lived for 1,000 years in New Zealand in peace and harmony? That was a biggie. That's what drove us right from the start, to sort of investigate it further.
I remember going to Haida Gwaii on the west coast of Canada, up near Alaska, and talking to a lady from there. And we sat there on the beach, and she looked around. She said, "My people have been here for thousands of years." And I mean, 90% of them died because of foreign invasion, mostly scarlet fever. But yeah,
Measles got a lot too.
Yeah, it was really...
Sometime I will tell you a story about the Haida people that came to New Zealand.
Oh, great.
But there we are.
I came to New Zealand.
Yes, well, no, they came for a visit. And I was part of the small entourage that transported them around Auckland and around to meet the Waitaha people and that. So, and the connections there. Oh, I tell you what, when you get into this stuff, you talk about magic. It's spiritual and it's magic. Things happen which you just sort of become gobsmacked. How on earth is that possible? Where did that come from? Who said that? What's that standing over there? Who's that walking there? Suddenly you're opened to all sorts of potentials outside our normal everyday faculties.
I'm just reflecting how grateful I am to be talking about magic after finishing my day job working on a computer today.
Well, there we are. Cripes, yeah. I mean, magic, earth magic, all sorts of different sorts of magic. When I say magic, it's just that things occur which are outside your normal sort of comfort zones, or you've never experienced before, or how is this possible? I can regale a number of stories about this to you, and sometime we may do that, okay, in another session or that, because this would take a long time.
Absolutely.
Some things I've written about, other things I've only spoken about. So it's there we are. Because Ray and I were fortunate, we were taken into the Waitaha people by a kaumātua who took us under his wing and told us lots of things, and also put protections in place for us as we travel around New Zealand. Gave us an incredible karakia, which I say when I'm on a marae, to introduce myself and why I'm there and why I'm travelling around the country, and put protections in place for us as we travelled. Because in those days there was, this is going back in the 90s, late 90s, there was a lot of antagonism towards the Waitaha, who were these people that have suddenly emerged out of the mists of time. They were known by the few, spread right throughout the country, but so many did not know of them. So many Māori people did not know of them. And suddenly, what's going on here? It's just another Pākehā thing put to, create schisms between us all. So we had that to contend with. Well, we went through the usual things. We had death threats, things like we had quite heavy-duty death threats. Don't publish your first book, otherwise you'll die.
Well, that didn't come true. That didn't come true.
No, it certainly didn't. Yeah. And I don't think I died. I nearly died a couple of times, but I don't think I died that time. No. Anyhow, but so you go through all that, and the passions of people are expressed, and they get. But over the last 20 years, I suppose, now I've seen such an incredible transition. Waitaha is now known and acknowledged by so many younger Māori people who've taken the trouble to talk to their elders and find out if there's any truth in this. Do we have a whakapapa which goes back into these people who lived here or here or here? And then they discovered they did. There was an adjunct there.
So the Waitaha were all around the country?
Yes.
Or not just kind of
Not just the South Island, no, they were right. Mostly in the North Island, and quite a lot in the South Island too. I mean, the North Island, of course, had what one would assume a better climate for birds and fish and arable land, but they prospered. I mean, there's one story which does appear in the Song of Waitaha about the fact that when they were living at Castle Hill there, they used to grow kumara at that altitude, which was unheard of. And it gives a description of how they did this, how they were able to control the airstreams around there. So they grew crops there. And of course, that particular place at the ancient marae there was the transition point for all the pouanamu or greenstone they carried across from the west coast over the ancient greenstone trail, which came up over up the Arahura River on the west coast side, over the Wilberforce and down into the Wilberforce River, over the pass, carried the greenstone all the way down the river, and then came across land to the marae there, and from there the greenstone was distributed to all parts of New Zealand and even around the Pacific Islands.
So Castle Hill. If you were to tell someone a little bit about Castle Hill, it's a place. Where is it? Why is it special? Where would you start?
It's a hard one in a way. I have a lot of people ask me about Castle Hill, so I do have a few pages prepared which I'll email to them, give them an overview and tell them where else they can look up things. There's a lot written about it now on Google, so it can be Googled up quite easily. A lot of people go to Castle Hill now and out of curiosity or on a pilgrimage, because they've come to understand that there's something special about here. So perhaps I should go, and perhaps it'll help me to clarify my thoughts or clarify my position in the world and get on with life. But it's a bit more than that, because you have visited there yourself. And it is in the stone and it's in the soil. The records are there. Everything that was ever sung there and spoken there is recorded like on a computer chip in the stones. The voices are still there, okay? Because that's all limestone country there. It's a limestone upthrust, quite different to everything else around, which is granite. And of course you've got all the silica and things in there, which of course would store the memory. I have not been to Castle Hill to do this, but I've been to other sites in New Zealand where I've taken my recording equipment, which was developed to listen to plants, and I have discovered that by attaching my contacts to things like stone on a sacred site or a special site, I can produce music.
So the vibration comes out.
It comes out, and like pouanamu, I've got heaps of pouanamu around the place, and I have some pieces here sometimes, and I'll sit and play them, and they play with me, and I hold them in my hand. So this is why I just so firmly believe there's so much recorded in the landscape, and it's not for everyone to go and sort of sit there and listen. I think if a person is of the right mind and a person has, say, some developed abilities or natural abilities to sit and quietly meditate and tune in, they'll get the messages. And I think we've all met people who've been to places like that, and they'll virtually come out walking on air and saying, what a great experience I had, a very personal experience. But this can happen. It's the same with healing. There are places around New Zealand. One in particular is a Kaimanawa Wall.
I tried to find that once. I had my Rainbow News and I was trying to follow the road, and I got somewhere, and then I started looking on the side, and then I didn't find it, and then someone said, you should have gone and asked at the crystal shop. They would have given you better instructions.
Oh, yeah. Well, I give people a map nowadays. Yeah. So next time you go.
Yeah, it was well over 20 years ago.
Well, perhaps we should go. I've got to do a trip back to the wall. I have to go because there's a big story about that, about the energies there and what have you.
And the Kaimanawa Wall, for anyone who doesn't know, is...
It's situated about an hour and a quarter's drive out of Taupo, which is in the central North Island of New Zealand. And
whereas Castle Hill's in the South Island, kind of.
Yes, that's in the south, so it's quite separate.
To the West Coast.
And so you drive out of Taupo, and you go on beautiful sealed roads, and you go through forestry roads, and you come to the natural forest. Beautiful, well-kept roads, because for hunters and trampers, and you drive in, and it's very easy to find. And sometimes it can be an anticlimax for people. They expect to see a great big, huge, square block structure as big as the pyramids in Giza, but much smaller, but stacked stones. And there's an energy there. It has become I believe, a place of pilgrimage. And we do need places that we can go to in the landscape, that we can journey to make that journey, to have that journey. I mean, we can go and sit in our garden with our favourite plants. We can go to the beach and sit in the sand hills and meditate. We can climb up the top of Mount Maunganui and meditate. But sometimes to make the journey, to actually drive and go and have this adventure where you're going to be away for a couple of days. I mean, you can drive down to, from where we live in the Bay of Plenty, or even from Auckland, you can be down there before lunchtime quite easily.
With those new roads, easily.
And and then you can spend all afternoon out there, go and stay somewhere comfortable if you like in Taupo, but there are camping areas up there. And I don't suggest going during the hunting season, though.
No.
During what they call the roar, because the car parks up there are full of intrepid hunters who are out to hunt a deer or two. So you don't want to get shot at.
I think that was what struck me about my trip out of Taupo looking for the Kamanua Wall at that stage, was that I'm not sure if I found it or not. I saw something which might have been it, but I wasn't sure. But it was a sense of pilgrimage, similar to when I went looking for the for Te Miringa Te Kākara, the ancient Lemurian temple site, which is a couple of hours from there. But also, fast forward that 20 odd years, last summer when I went to Castle Hill, I knew of Castle Hill for so long, but I didn't want to force myself for a Castle Hill trip until it was the right time. And I my whole day that day was like a pilgrimage, and I turned off at the time that flashed on the clock in my sight.
Right.
And then later that day I went to the Clay Cliffs down at Omarama, and it felt like a pilgrimage day of visiting. Which
is wonderful, because that's it. It's a pilgrimage day. There are so many places that we can go to. And even, I often say to people, if you've got time to just go for a Sunday afternoon drive, get out of your town or your city and take the road out of town, but then take one of the byways, take one of the lesser roads which goes up through the farmland. And so often you can be driving around these roads, winding round hills of sheep stations, and you'll come across rocky outcrops and trees in the distance and distant view of the sea. And so often, though, you'll come to somewhere which you've got to stop. I've got to get out here. I've got to look at this. And I even say to people that if you do it correctly, you can even walk to this place through the fence which has drawn you. Just go on down the road if you haven't already passed the farmhouse. Ask the farmer if you can climb over his fence at the top there and just go and stand by these rocks. And you can get to do it quite easily. They might look at you, but they'll let you, as long as you don't open the gate and let the sheep out. So this is the beauty of travelling off the track. And also, all around New Zealand, besides every small town, there was always a memorial park. And often it was a bushman's or a farmer's or a bushman's park. And it may be just 10, 12 acres of standing trees which have been kept alive without being cut. All around was farms. And those are amazing places to go to, because here you have ancient trees. And these are well signposted. You can see a little sign might say such and such a park. No history, but you just stop there and wander into this little park. And you suddenly find yourself away from the main road. I can't hear the traffic. And you're in a totally different environment. You know the feeling I'm talking about too. And then you may suddenly realise why at some time or another the farmer fenced this off and kept all his stock out and gifted it to the local council, because he realised there was something so special in there, he had to protect it, even though he could not, say, put a name to it. But there was something about it, and he thought, I've got to keep this. So little places like that are all over our countryside. You can just stop on the side of the road and put out your picnic. And
there's actually a game. A friend of mine's given it to me. It's quite popular. It's gone quite big overseas. It's called Lost, and you pick a card and it says turn left.
Ooh!
And then you pick another card. Might say turn right. and
You actually do this while you're driving?
Well, yeah, or cycling or
Cycling and walking?
Walking. And so I actually read on our mainstream news that there was a family who were playing this game in Australia, and they found an old site, like an old shop that had been boarded up or something. Was it a shop or a hotel? And no one had been there since the 1970s or something. And there was all this history, and no one knew it was there. And then it made the news. I can't remember the detail, which isn't particularly useful. Though. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. What a grand adventure game that is.
Yeah.
It's a bit like other things that are going on. People leave clues all over the place now.
Oh, the geocaching.
Yeah, geocaching. I'm intrigued by that. I'd go crazy actually trying to find something. I thought, God, where is it? Where can I find something?
We were actually on the Hump Ridge track, which is a 3-day hike in Fiordland, on the edge of Fiordland National Park in Southland.
Yeah.
And one of the crew we were tramping with knew that there was a geocache at one of the big bridges that we were just about to cross, and went and found the geocache and wrote her name down.
Did you find it?
Yeah, well, she did, yeah.
Well, how exciting.
I was too busy eating
so it
my
works.
lunch. But yeah.
Wow. No, so this is good because these sort of things will take people off the beaten track, take them out of themselves, give them something different to aim for.
So that list that you were given that you made of all those places that featured in the Song of Waitaha, what percentage do you think that you managed to find?
Not all of them at all. Probably percentage-wise, there may be 30 or 40. We may have found visited 15 or 20. Okay. And some places, though, the reference was very vague. So you had to try and work out where that little village would have been, because this particular valley, this is down at a place called the Rainy River out of Nelson, and Ringa River, that's right. And but over the years, of course, everything been farmed around there. The river changed its course so many times. But that was the first time we went there to that particular place. It gave me a clue what to do. We were with Hamish Miller, the geomancer that we brought out from England, and he dowsed where the village would have been there. So he picked it up beautifully, and I sort of, well, that's interesting because the river was right below this very steep bank from the road, and the village, which would have been on the edge of the river, was right across in the middle of a flat paddock. So that's because, of course, the river changed. Now, there would have been nothing for us to see there because everything, flooding and things move. Yeah. Yeah. There's lots of places like that, my gosh. You talk about Timaringa Tikakara. I mean, that's an interesting place as well. Lots of stories about that, but it's a place which has to be more deeply understood than most people do, because that is still a very, very special place to the iwi of today.
Right.
And if you're fortunate enough to have an iwi representative or someone from the local iwi, you can go. But even within the iwi down there, there's a little division of thoughts about what we should do here and there. But it doesn't take away from the energy of the place.
I guess I was just lucky. I kind of, when I went, you could. I just kind of asked around in town, and then, well, actually, I was told what time to arrive in town and to look for someone in a red jumper, and that gave me the instructions how to get there, and they just let me in. But I mean, this was back in 2000. I imagine that it's not easy to get to.
No, it still is, because a lot of people go there.
Oh yeah.
But it's just a courtesy of, say, telling someone you're there on the land, because it is a Maori Trust farm, as you know, and they farm it diligently with lots of cows and sheep and that, but they still maintain, the tracks, and of course the tracks you take as you drive up and over the hill down to, and in the winter that's not as navigable, so it pays to get a bit of local advice. So you leave your car down by the creek, by the bridge, and walk all the way over and back. Yeah,
I think I went in July.
I spent nights out there and things like that. It's an incredibly special place.
And so it was the site of a temple that was burnt down in
It was,
1984.
That's yes, yeah. I've seen photographs. It's interesting. The then Ministry of Works, which was a government department, the draftspeople were instructed there to go out and draw the building and photograph it and record it, which they did a couple of years before it was burnt to the ground. There was some young Maori chap, which he was Pīrau, and he just for some reason didn't like it and went and set it on fire and burnt it to the ground.
I guess he wasn't peed out because pee didn't exist then, but something similar, hey?
Oh, well, they say he was Pīrau.
He was what, sorry?
Pīrau. That's mad, crazy.
Pīrau. Oh, okay.
It's a Māori name, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were talking about, that substance that got really, really popular 20 years ago. Pee.
No.
We've come back from overseas and going, what's pee?
Sorry. Pīrau.
Pīrau.
Oh,
okay,
it's
cool.
crazy. Māori for crazy. And so then, of course, they're going to rebuild it, and they got logs in and put them there ready to go, but nothing ever happened. Then they built the house there, the new whare there. So it's full of interesting history, which we've delved into and found lots of things around the place, which are great pointers to what may have gone on there. But that was actually, Timuringi Te Kakara was one of 4 different places like that of schools of learning. This was the topmost one. So all the way down the valley towards Tauramanui, the others were set. Yeah. So there was a whole string of them in that area. So it was a very, very special place for the ancient people.
And so in some of the Rainbow News articles that you wrote over the time that you wrote for them, I remember a few. I remember that there were ones where you had the maps of stones that were emulating constellations.
Oh, yeah.
Were they related to the Song of Waitaha
no.
places, or completely different?
No, they really relate more to Polynesian Māori times, put in place and acknowledged in the last 700 years. And these are by the Ngāpui people up the far north. And so we brought out an archaeo-astronomer from Tasmania in Australia to help us to look at certain things we're trying to find in the north, and finding stones and formations that were just sort of so strange, and why were they doing this? And obviously the people were observing transitions and various things at certain times of the year. And then a dear old Māori lady gave us this particular map, which showed all the mountain tops. I was looking at it just recently again. Don't ask me to remember exactly everything, but it represented a Taurus, Pleiades. It represented the stars in the sky, and they're each named from Pangaru right the way round to all the other mountains, right down to Manganui Bluff. And so it was a star map, but Ngāpui said, well, these were just our tribal boundaries, which might be right, yeah. But that's interesting in its own right. That is something which Māori people today, if you ask them about it up there, some hapu will claim it, well, it was our hapu, and then someone else will say, oh, no, it was our hapu who did that, so anyhow. And this is what often happens with stories which come out from a deeper history. They can either get changed or convoluted or claimed by other people for their own purpose. Their own purpose may be that they think they should know and they should talk about, and not anyone else. So you can step on lots of toes if you don't watch it. But no, I was just looking at that only yesterday, actually. I found it on my files here. Oh, craps. Fancy that. Interesting map. I must publish it again sometime.
Is there
the story I've got, there's a whole story behind it.
Is there a collection of your articles at Rainbow News? He walks away. He's going to get a book, I think. He's looking through some books. The Secret
This
Land,
particular book
Journeys into the Mystery.
was the second of three books. And this is the book I wrote, put together and compiled, and it's
nice font.
It's a lot of I think it's 10, I forget how many chapters. Let's have a look. 22 chapters, based on 22 articles of the 84 I wrote.
Oh, great!
In the early days, which includes exactly what you're talking about with the map, etc. Which was just incredible. All the places we visited, which I had all the photographs.
Oh, colour photographs.
In the this book's out of print. I'm not going to reprint it. Now here we are here.
Oh.
Perhaps I didn't put the map in there. That's what I did. No. So the map must be somewhere else. So I did an article here on walking with the stars, and the piece that you're talking about, what I put the map in. And so there were all these words, as you can see. There's a lot written there about every location.
Oh, right.
And what the full Maori name was, or the ancient Maori name. And I'm sorry, the map is not here in this. And it was quite involved. It goes on. There's a number of points which made up that particular. I'm pleased that I actually printed it. I'm sorry that the book's out of print. I'm not going to reprint this one, but it is available as an ebook online.
Oh, that's great.
Which is a lot cheaper. So it's Journeys into the Mystery, Secret Land Book 2. So I guess what we've done is left lots of clues for lots of things that we've scattered from our investigations and our writings over a period of time. And possibly we've promoted a lot more interest in Waitahara and the deeper history of the country, which is what we really set out to do or try to do, and also got a lot of people on a slightly different road and to explore the wonders of our country. I mean, I often used to say to people when I was doing all the summer festivals, often talking, I say, listen, New Zealand is one of the most sacred landscapes in the world. And I'll qualify this by sort of saying what we've got in the landscape, which is known by Māori and the early comers, and given a name and given a reason. And I even go further and I say, look, it's not only the most sacred land in the country, it is also a holy land. Then, of course, there are people who look upon New Zealand as having a link to Lemuria. And one of the most interesting links I've heard about was that New Zealand was not part of Lemuria, but New Zealand was a place that Lemurians came to for certain rituals, which is interesting. And I've been taken to places out on the west coast, just inland from Kawhia, which really have a strange Lemurian influence about them, if you like to think about it. The stones there, limestone, which is in strange shapes, like whales and things like that. And so that was interesting to put forward that. So then, of course, geologists a couple of years ago put out a new map of the continent in New Zealand. You may have seen that. And it was suddenly that the landmass of New Zealand, we only live on the outcrops. The landmass of New Zealand was so big, it was larger than the continent of India. I thought, wow. And so at some stage in the very distant past, the land has been up and down a number of times.
It was like a sub-tectonic plate or something, wasn't
it?
It
was part of the
And New Caledonia was on it.
Yeah, New Caledonia on the top.
Norfolk Island. And,
all of that. Took all those from the Aussies, Norfolk Island and Lord Howe Island. And but so there's been lots of things that have gone on within the landscape of New Zealand in very ancient times. There's no fossil record to say, that there were people here or anyone doing anything 250 million years ago. But there is fossil record to say that there were people here before Maori came, particularly with fossils of the kuri, which is a Maori... No, sorry.
Kia ora, the rat?
The rat. The Maori rat. Kuri's a dog. And so fossilised rat bones were found buried under the volcanic ash over the last Taupo eruption in 239 AD. And it just showed that how the Maori rat get here. So scientists did a lot of research. They put forward theories that were floated here on some driftwood. It swam here. Rats don't swim. They're not good swimmers. And so only people could have brought the rat here and dropped it off, or got off the boat and hopped off when it was here.
Well, there were all sorts of... I can't source where I got the information, but I suspect it was your words in Rainbow News. Wasn't there the cave drawings in the Mackenzie country?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, the cave drawings all down the South Island,
and they were said to be Taiwanese. Taiwanese?
There was
China.
perhaps an influence.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. But some of them, they just. Ray and I have been down and looked at some of those, and Ngaitahu have sort of claimed ownership of all those, and they are protecting them, thank goodness, because they were just disappearing, sort of. But no, there's so much in our landscape, and so for a serious investigator, there's a lot to see and a lot to do.
Yeah,
a lot of adventures to be had.
Yes.
And the fact that we've had an adventure or two over 30 odd years doesn't mean to say that the adventures are all being had. There's more to be had. I mean, cripes, we've done helicopter trips 6,000 foot up into the Southern Alps to land at an ancient and spend a day at an ancient greenstone site way up in the mountains. Amazing. With Barry Brailsford and another couple of people. And to actually go and see these places and just get the feeling.
It's the feeling.
That's right, it is. Because the people that were there. Okay, so you know a little bit about psychometry, how psychometry works, how a person can go into a place, for instance, out in the garden here, pick up a rock in the garden and sort of say, wow, there's a message here, and this is the message. So I used to work with two good psychometrists and also a good dowser. He could map dowse from great distances away. And he or these two men were great helps to us in finding places. I'd get in touch with Gordon and sort of say, well, we're down the South Island and we're trying to find this ancient mud-eye site, which is called so-and-so, but it's just getting a bit hard to find. Could you have a look? So he'd dowse away on his map up there in Dargaville, send us down an email sort of saying, try there. And also psychometry with old Dr. Bill, a GP down in the Motueka. Gosh, he was a mystical man. And we'd go on to an ancient site and he'd just pick up stones and sort of, wow, ooh, there's been some bitterness here, there's been bloodshed here, there's been battles fought, or there's been great happiness here. And he could actually read what was going on with the people that were living there 300, 400, 500,000 years ago, which I've also worked with people who do remote viewing. And when we were doing our documentary a few years ago on the Patapairehi, trying to find the people of the forest, I got in touch with a remote viewer in Auckland. I said, listen, can you just have a look in the Waipua forest and try and see if you can pinpoint a place up there which we should really have a look at. Now, the Waipua forest, we drive through it going up north and etc., drive through all these beautiful big kauri trees and look down the bank. That's just part of the forest. It's like this. Rivers and valleys, and it's so steep and full of massive trees. And so he came up with a site. It was unattainable for us. We couldn't do anything about getting in there because we were suddenly banned from filming up there. The local Maori didn't like us filming, and it wasn't their forest, but they were the caretakers. So it's the same with Puruora Forest, just down the road from Timaringa Te Kakara. We'd been going there for a number of years and had great experiences with the Patapairehi in the forest there. And we got permission from a kauatua to film.
Near Te Kuiri? Kind of
No, it's back towards Benidale.
Benidale.
Not far from Timaringa Te Kakara, just down the road.
I was just trying to give context for if someone was to look on a map and didn't know the area.
It's near Puruora Forest, right in the dead centre of New Zealand, actually.
Yeah, north of Lake Taupo is probably
north of Lake Taupo.
Describing
it. That's right. Yes, yeah, that's right. And So we had to film there sort of in a clandestine way. One kaumātua gave us permission, and the other senior kaumātua had his nose, I think, put out of joint, so he would not give us permission. But we had everything set up, so we went, be damned. And we did the same with Waipua Forest. The reason they tried to sort of keep us out was more political than anything else, nothing to do with the patapaere.
No.
So we went ahead and filmed and got good footage. Have you seen the documentary?
No, I haven't, but I just saw it.
I'll give you a
before
copy
we
to
started.
take home and have a look at sometime.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Pureora Forest Park's probably more famous for its cycling these days, the Timber Trail.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's quite an incredible feature. It takes a lot of people down there. But the area we go to is back across the main road, and it's a part of Pureora, but it's separated by the Western Highway running through there. And we had lots of events down there over the years where people who are looking spiritually at things would come together for a weekend and have a weekend and chanting and dancing and eating lots of good food and telling big stories and yarns. And so that's where, of course, when you go to places like this, you have experiences which leave you sort of wondering. The first experience I had down there with the patapaere, this was a particular weekend. There was probably about 25 people in for the weekend. And the first night, Friday night, went to bed fairly late. There were 2 young children there with their parents, but everyone else were adults. So the children and their parents were in a shared bunk room. There was quite a few adults in there. And I fortunately ended up with a room on my own, which is nice. I can't put up with other people snoring. And so I just climbed in my sleeping bag and sitting down on my bunk. And there was a window right above me. And suddenly on the window, tap, 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 and laughter. I was shivers. So I swung my legs around, it's like when your sleeping bag all zipped up, stumbled up to the window, pulled the curtains back, they had ordinary curtains, under the catch, threw the window open, looked outside, and nothing. I thought, oh, gosh, those kids are out. What the heck are they doing? Why'd they pick on me? So I closed the window, drew the blinds, sitting on the bed, just putting my feet back in the sleeping bag, tap, tap, tap on the window, laugh, 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 laugh. So, and of course, this window was on the back of a long back of the building, long wall, nowhere to hide, no trees, nowhere to go. So I was up quickly, threw the window open, looked out, no one inside. I thought, those kids must be quick. Okay, I'll catch them out. So I jumped up, grabbed my torch and went down the passageway to where they were with their parents. Sneaked in, everyone was fast asleep. They must have wondered what I was doing if they'd woken up. Flashed the torch across, there's the 2 kids. Out to it in dead sleep. So that was my first incredible experience of Pureora Forest. And that's what prompted us to go back there to film, to see if we could capture the patapaere.
So you've got the documentary on the patapaere, but you have also been involved in others. Wasn't there was one a few years ago that was about people, and there was a lady with red hair from Rotorua.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah. That's an Australian series, 3-part series by an Australian documentary making. Yeah, all of that. You get involved with bits and pieces. But this was our own documentary we made, Voices of the Forest. And we had just a lovely sort of crew. There was the cameraman, our producer, and our director and myself, and the 4 of us were gallivanting all over the place. We put the whole thing together, I think, in 2 weeks, and it was just magnificent.
Oh, brilliant!
Yeah.
And when was that?
Well, that's about 12 years ago now.
Oh, okay. I'm mentally mapping it into the astrological transits that we talk about in this podcast. Because we were talking before we started recording, and I said, "Oh, what were you doing? Half your life ago when you're in your early 40s." Were there big changes? And you said that just before that time you had an interesting experience when you were in your 30s, mid-30s with... On
the near-death experience?
Yeah.
Oh, that was life-changing. I didn't realise I knew that bee stings affected me, but I didn't realise how badly. And Raymond and I had in those days, we had a small country store at the back of Huntly in the Waikato. And it came Friday night, and we're just standing outside there. We closed the shop down, just chatting to a couple of guys out the front there. Raymond was inside closing up the shop. And a bee fell off the rafter, fell onto my neck, and immediately stung me. And suddenly I started to shoot. So there was a local doctor who lived at another village further up the road. Couldn't get hold of her. She was out, not available. So suddenly Raymond just said, "You've got to get him to the doctor," because I was fading. I was starting to lose consciousness. So these guys, I remember them trying to bundle me in the back of a 2-seater Volkswagen. And then I was gone out to it. And they had to take me through to Huntly. And it was probably a 12, 13 minute run. And so on the way through, I carked it, evacuated my bowels and everything, so the body had just given up. And next thing I remember, I was travelling along, walking, moving gently down this great big tunnel with all the colours around. There was music, but I don't remember much about the music. But I was more interested in the fact that I was going down this tunnel, which just curved away to my right, and there was someone with me, alongside me, like a guide. I wasn't aware who or what, but I was just aware of someone there. And I was going, and wow, I was just overwhelmed. And then the next thing, a voice came through and said, "I think we've got him. I think we can save him." And it was a doctor in his surgery at the back of his business in Huntly. And they got me in on the table, and he had actually had a death from a bee sting the week before, as it turned out. And so suddenly, and so he did all sorts of things, like injecting me straight in the heart with adrenaline and all that sort of thing. And next thing, I could hear this voice saying, "I think we've got him. I think he's going to come back." And I was saying, no, let me go. I don't want to come back. Which is interesting, because I wasn't even thinking of my wife and my family and my children or anything. So that was a very, very meaningful experience. And when I came to, I was sick for weeks after. I was almost bedridden. And I felt, if you could liken taking a beautiful silk scarf and dragging it over a thorn bush and tearing it, I felt my fabric had been torn. I was just torn to pieces inside. And I wasn't expressing any disappointment that I can remember that I'd come back, because I didn't know where I'd been. Because in those days, this was back in the early 70s, I'd never heard of a near-death experience. Wasn't even a term which was around. They occurred, obviously, to people. So that was a big turning point. And then 3 years after that, we discovered a particular path which we became initiated in and have followed for the last 48 years. And
that would have been your astrological midlife.
There you are.
Beginning.
Yeah, beginning. No, that's right. Yeah. And so that was so important. Yeah. Yeah. So I never looked back since.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you certainly had quite some adventures.
Oh, I didn't tell you about this one, did I?
No, the one where...
That was when I was 16 and a half.
Oh, right. So if you can't see, but he's holding his hand.
God, yeah, fingers missing.
I had to actually stop and count. Hang on, that's a finger. No, hang on, there's 1.5 fingers missing.
Yeah, that's right. And a hand, which is, and one eye gone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so when I was 16 and a half, I was doing a lot of experimenting as looking at being a physicist in my future life as a 16-year-old.
I wondered, experimenting as a teenager has a lot of different definitions according to different...
Oh, you're quite right too.
Generations.
And so we had opportunity to purloin live ammunition from a creek bed in a creek in Papakura, which was on the site of an old American army camp. This was back in the 50s. And so when the Americans left, they were always a bit untidy. All the buildings went. But they threw strings of ammunition and hand grenades in the creek. for people to find and trip over. So we found that we could get these big anti-aircraft shells and take the top off them and tip out the cordite, which is an explosive stuff. It has to be ignited by percussion. And we can make little fizzes and fireworks out of them. Not to blow anything up, but just to play. So I was mixing up a batch of this, or had it in a jar, and the bloody thing exploded in my hand. So that was a biggie, actually. So I spent next 3 months after that in 2 different hospitals in Auckland, being stitched back together and put back together as best as they could.
Oh, I bet your mother was worried and exasperated,
my mum,
both.
She's my stepmom. She was such a lovely lady. And there was just having her second son to my father, and she was just due 2 weeks after I did this. Oh. And I remember as they loaded me into there, we had to walk out from this farm to a house. There were 2 of us together. We struck a little group of Boy Scouts out on a weekend camp. This was on a Saturday morning. And we had to put a tourniquet on me. And I was a mess, so just blood from head to foot. I was shrapnel everywhere. And so they put a tourniquet on and they accompanied us to the nearest farmhouse, get a phone, no one home. So one of them did the Boy Scout thing, smashed the window, went inside, rung the ambulance. And the ambulance came out to pick me up, of course. And I remember saying to them, for goodness sake, when you tell my parents my mother is due to have a baby within the next 10 days, please, watch how you handle it. That's all I said. I remember saying that, So she did have the baby about 10 days later, and I went to see her in the home. But these are major turning points, and I often say to people, sometimes it is a traumatic experience. It may be at the right time according to things astrologically, and I think that sometimes things may occur outside those parameters, which there could be something which could have happened astrologically, which didn't, but you moved it and it happened over here. So I don't know. Whatever's in your destiny, it's going to occur. So that was life-changing. As a 16-year-old, missed out on all my school and all my exams and all that sort of stuff, So, but then I went on into the workaday world after that. My father arranged a job for me. He knew a few people around, and it was Hannah's shoe store, and they said, we'll employ him in Hannah's shoe store in Otahu. So I used to go on the bus every day as an apprentice. Cripes, what a thing to do. And in those days, you had to learn from the bottom up.
Were you making the shoes?
No. Selling shoes.
Just
I was a shoe salesman.
Yeah, I did.
No, you had to learn, you had to wash the windows and scrub the tiles out the front and all that sort of thing. And so that gave me confidence. And the manager there said, when you came for the interview and I looked at you, I got in touch with the heads in Wellington and said, you've got these physical disabilities, which included one eye missing. And so, because I got an artificial eye after that, which used to move around the place. It was quite handy, actually. And and he said, he got in touch with the head office in Wellington, and they said, listen, we don't care if he's got a big wart on his nose as long as he can sell shoes. So I took him on, and that gave me confidence. I never looked back.
And so fast forward to today, when you're in your Neptune return, which is when the kind of very spiritual planet of Neptune comes back to where it was when you were born. So I don't know if now it's quite spiritual for you.
That's interesting.
That's what's happening. And soon Pluto will come back to where it was when you were born, which is quite unique to your generation. It won't happen to my generation because we won't live till 120. Pluto's got a elliptical orbit.
Well, isn't it interesting what you're born into, which you're not aware of? I was not aware of that.
Absolutely. We're born into different generations. You can do it by where Pluto was in Leo when you were born, or Libra when I was born. That in recent years, you've got a completely different passion, but still nature related.
Oh no, it was, yeah.
Yeah, so
and that came about by going out and investigating these ancient sites throughout New Zealand. And I did what you call all the archaeological work. As I mentioned in the documentary, I did the measurements and took the photographs and pontificated. But so often I was out by myself, miles away from anywhere, on the edge of a forest or what have you. and I'd become aware that I was being observed. You get that feeling. You've probably had that feeling sometimes. You go on somewhere and think, oh, someone's out there. And so this used to happen quite often. Got to a stage where I'd whoop around quickly to see who was looking at me from behind a tree, but no one there. So that
just
made me
realise
right? That, there's more out there. I went through a stage thinking that this may have been Maori guardians at various sites. And I remember when Raymond and I forget what year it was now, back in the 90s sometime, we went across the ancient greenstone trails. We did a 6-day climb over the mountains with other people, carrying Pouanamu from the coast across to Castle Hill with Waitaha people.
I think I may have read about it at some stage.
Yeah. And that Raven and I were helicoptered ahead of the main group. We missed going down the steep side of the mountain, which was good. And we had to get the campsite ready, which was an old trapper's hut, and get water and from the river, from the Wilberforce River, and timber. Not much to do. Helicopter dropped us off there. He didn't even know where he was going. He said, hold on. He said, I'll just go and have a look inside the hut and see what name's on it. And he went in. It was the right hut, So we went in. Now we got everything done, and it was before lunch, and we knew the others would be a long time away because they were coming right up over the pass at the top and down through all the scree. And we went and sat down on the banks of this river. And you know what the glacial rivers are like in the South Island. They're beautiful, bluey green, towering mountains up there. And while we're there, a little Cessna aeroplane flew way up. You could hardly see it. It was like a bird. It went up there and round there and disappeared. Oh, civilization. And so Ray and I just were meditating on the side of the river there. And I mentioned this actually in our documentary. And suddenly I heard the sound of singing and chanting. And of course I lost the moment by sort of coming to turn around to look at Raywin. And she was looking at me and she said, did you hear that? I said, yeah. So we both heard singing and chanting. I thought, wow, it just must be our group coming down behind us, because we did trail songs to help to get us into a rhythm. Barry Brailsford was leading us, so he's a pretty hard taskmaster. And they didn't arrive for another 5 hours. And I said to them when I arrived, I said, wow, were you doing trail songs today? He said, no. He said, we were going so fast because we had to double march today to get to this site where you were, and do double the time, and we weren't singing. So Raymond and I put this down to being guardians, because we were actually sitting on the ancient greenstone trail. Across the river was the trail of the warriors. And so these two trails went side by side right across the mountains. The warriors, when they were going to war, would use that when they're coming back from war. And those carrying the greenstone would only walk on this trail. And I thought, well, the guardians. But then I sort of reassessed this after many years, and I thought, really, I think it was the Pataparehi. The words, there's no words that I could say of the song. I can't remember what the melody was like. It was quite fleeting, because once you open your eyes, you lose it. And, I should have just kept my eyes closed and waited for a while. So we've had lots of experiences like that when we've been out, with voices and singing and people chattering and walking past, and you can't see them as they walk past.
Wow.
This has happened with groups of 5 or 6 of us sitting there at Potu Point on the top of the Kaipara Harbour, investigating an ancient Waitaha site there. And we'd been looking around trying to find various things which indicated that they were there. We'd found their water supply, and we were sitting on the edge of this little pond, which was spring-fed, just having a drink of water and a muesli bar, and miles away from anyone and anywhere. And suddenly we heard voices just round the corner there. There's a bit of a hill there. And so round that side, coming from the way we'd just come, we heard voices. We looked at each other and said, oh, crap, there's someone else here. I said, oh, yeah. And so the voices got louder and louder. And so all of us all stood up to have a jack nohi, which is to have a look around the corner. And there it is, open, because this is quite open coastal tea tree and things like that. Nothing, no much overgrass, undergrowth rather, in this area, and things were just quite open. And the voices went past, chatting away. We couldn't hear what they're saying, right in front of the six of us, and disappeared up that way.
Interesting.
So we thought, being open-minded, perhaps there may be something in that direction that we should go and look at. So we did, and we found something which was quite bewildering, still is bewildering, but that's a story for another day.
Another time. Well, perhaps you could give me a little synopsis of what you're doing a lot of these days with plants.
Oh, heavens above, I've got time for that.
Well, probably not a lot of time.
Okay, plants.
Yep, we've got the
Plant music, right. 12 years ago, when I fell over here on the land and broke my leg, I was sitting here, sort of in a chair like you do. And what I'm going to do, and then suddenly I read about a device which you could purchase from a group in Italy, and allowed you to put a couple of electrodes on the plant around the roots and record the plant playing music. And I thought, wow, I've got to look at this. Suddenly I was intrigued. I did have something with plants because we live in this incredible forest here, as you can see. And I thought, I've got to get one of those. So I bought one of these, sat in the lounge there with Sybella, my peace lily. It's the only thing I had access to, and started experimenting. So one thing led to another, and now we have more sophisticated equipment, which is more refined, more sophisticated and easier to carry. And so virtually what we're doing, as scientists have found that looking more deeply at plants, what makes them work, how they work, and the fact that the plant lily, which I'm pointing to on the table here, like any other living plant or tree on the planet, is doing its thing. First of all, it's bringing in light, sunlight if it's a plant out in the sun, and it's bringing in the carbons out of the atmosphere. It's taking them down through all the stems and leaves and down to the roots. It's converting the carbon into plant sugar, and then the plant itself is expiring moisture and putting oxygen back out. Now, all these things which occur within the leaf, leaves and the branches and the trunk is creating its movement. It's like it's like the circulation of a human, or
right. So it's movement.
So it's movement aside, and it's creating
frequency.
static electricity, not frequencies. There may be frequencies involved,
but a little gadget that translates it to music.
So we pick up the static electricity, and we translate that into musical notes.
So what does that sound like?
Would you like to hear it?
Yes, please.
All right, we'll do that. I hope you won't be alarmed. This is just one of the tunes that Sybella plays.
How many tunes are there? Well, rough.
As many as I like.
Because the electricity is different each time?
I choose instruments.
Or the app
I
on your
choose
phone
chords,
that's hooked up to the
gadget.
gadget.
App on the phone, yeah.
Gives options.
I can choose all the options. And so I can convert or channel hers into different hertz, different notes, musical notes, and even a range of instruments.
And you've done this. I mean, Sybella's clearly your favourite because I do see you post with Sybella music because she's very accessible sitting here on the kitchen table.
Yeah, but we just play all the time. And I remember the first time I took Sybella out for a demonstration after my leg was healed. I went to the Charter Centre in Tuakau in South Auckland. There was a duo on there and they wanted me to come. So I managed to get through there, took Sybella, put her behind me, and I gave a talk for an hour and a half about plants and what's going on in the plant world, the scientists and plant memories and plants. Plants are just so wonderful. Anyhow, she was playing in the background while I spoke the whole time. And a nice attentive audience there. And when I finished, I just turned the volume up a little and said, thank you very much. And then the lady leading everything there said, we'll do a waiata now for you. So they all stood and did Te Aroha, sung through. which is beautiful. And Sybella was still playing the same tune in the background. And then the lady said, we'll do the last chorus in English, which everyone seemed to know. And as soon as she said that, Sybella stopped playing. And she played for an hour and a half. I immediately, while they were still singing it, I immediately turned around and had a look. And the power's still on, plug's still in, the lights are still flashing. I thought, oh well, I don't know what's happened here. They finished singing, and they were just standing there, just breathing out. She burst back into life with the most amazing fanfare. I've never heard it since. She went something like this, do 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 do, with 3 notes like that. Everyone around, including myself, were flabbergasted. They still talk about it at Charter Centre. The fact they were just amazed. So was I. And I thought, who are we to really underestimate what plants see and feel and hear? And that's right. I mean, some scientists now are saying that in 15 to 20 years' time, we're going to have to recognise trees as sentient beings. That's where the research is going. So I'm just looking at this all the time, keeping up with the research.
Thank you so
there we
much.
are.
Thank you for playing Sybella, telling us stories of your life.
Well, probably we'd need another few days to get through the whole lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'll keep
But
that in mind for another time.
No, I don't. Some things I've got to forget.
But some of your stuff is available. Some of your books are still available.
Books are still, I've got 2 books available here on my website, which is secretland.co.nz. And I've also got 2 books up on Kindle and Amazon, which you can download fully illustrated with colour pictures. E-books, yeah. And but no music. I haven't put any music out much at all, but I'm getting ready to do that. But you can hear what Sybella, or what, I mean, I've got recordings of rimu trees and kauri trees in the forest here. Every song's different. No 2 are the same. And so it's like I've got a job of many lifetimes to complete.
Well, clearly that bee wasn't going to take you out back then.
Well, that bee opened up a lot for me. It did.
Well, thanks, Gary.
Thank you for being so patient and sitting there with all your wonderful apparatus. And it didn't deter me at all. I could just look at you smiling away there. And sometimes I'll just say something to get an acknowledgement and you'd nod back and smile, so that's good.
I love your stories and in the.
Thank you, my love. Look, thank you for you do honour me by recording this, and hopefully you've got something you can share.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, you look enthusiastic enough.
Yeah, I'm inspired. And
Okay.
here we can keep going, unraveling life.